in the lead up to the 2016 election. This today formalizes Trump's status as a convicted felon and makes him the first to carry that title into the White House. Trump and his lawyers had tried tirelessly to delay today's proceedings, taking their appeal all the way to the Supreme Court. Then we heard from the Supreme Court last night, and they ruled in a 5-4 decision that the sentencing could take place today, including 2 of the conservative justices siding with 3 in the liberal wing of the Supreme Court. I want to bring in our congressional correspondent, Scott McFarland. And Scott, what does unconditional discharge mean?
It means this case is over. It has been wrapped up. That's the final chapter in this story. And what the judge says in explaining the unconditional discharge is that a prison sentence or a further sentence would serve no practical purpose. It wouldn't do any good. That's the type of thing, Nora, we'd see when there's a major health concern for a defendant or a geriatric defendant, somebody who couldn't be reasonably put in prison or put on probation and serve any ends.
I want to bring in our chief election campaign correspondent, Robert Costa. Trump appearing virtually from Mar-a-Lago and once again strongly defending himself.
He did strongly defend himself, Nora, but we see from the president-elect defiance at this moment and disregard for the criminal conviction. He will continue to appeal it. He's unhappy with the Supreme Court, but there is a sense, based on my reporting inside Trump's inner circle, that this conviction and this unconditional sentencing will not be a burden on his presidency once he takes office later this month.
I want to bring in CBS News legal contributor and criminal defense attorney Caroline Polisi. She is with us. And Caroline, I just want to point out what the prosecutor said heading into this. His name is Joshua Steinglass. He blasted Trump before this sentencing, saying that rather than expressing any remorse for his criminal acts, that Trump has spread disdain for our institutions and the rule of the law. He said the defendant has caused enduring damage to public perception of the criminal justice system and placed officers of the court in harm's way. The president's attorney responding, I very, very much disagree. So, Caroline, I do want to ask you, what does this mean, though, in terms of the legal precedent, if any, that it sets?
Yeah, that's right, Nora. In a lot of ways, this was just a procedural bookend and really some legal theater in that it is very rare for both the prosecution and the defense to know in advance of sentencing that the sentence will be an unconditional discharge, which essentially is exactly what it sounds like. It's not even a slap on the wrist. There's no jail time, obviously, but no fines, no conditions, no restitution, no, community service, even nothing being imposed here. And so really, you saw the prosecutor Steinglass just getting on the record Trump's disdain for the rule of law. But, we talk a lot about whether or not Trump is above the law. And I think today really solidified the fact that he is, in that the Supreme Court enshrined this idea of presidential immunity. We talked when he was convicted in this case. We were debating whether or not jail time would be imposed, but I don't think anybody thought that there would be this unconditional discharge after he was elected. All of a sudden, this is what is happening. And so, as noted, this case is not over. He will continue to exercise his appellate rights.
Caroline, I have to ask you, because Judge Merchan, in issuing that unconditional discharge, said he does that because he has to do it without encroaching on the highest post in the land. Does that negate at all that the president-elect now becomes the only president to have been sentenced on criminal charges?
Yeah, look, it's a huge deal symbolically. This was a win for the Manhattan DA's office, but in a lot of senses, it was a Pyrrhic victory. Look, one hallmark of the criminal justice system is retribution, and that was not done here. However, for now, at least, his conviction is sort of enshrined procedurally. He will remain a convicted felon while in office. There's nothing that bars him from holding office while being a convicted felon. And again, I think the headline that SCOTUS refused to stop this proceeding today, the lead there really is that it was a 5-4 decision, and they indicated that these issues, these evidentiary issues regarding potential presidential immunity, could and potentially would be taken up on appeal. So signaling there that they were open potentially to the fact of reviewing this case, and certainly could get back to the Supreme Court.
That's a really interesting and important point. Caroline, I want to bring in CBS's Katrina Kaufman. She has followed this trial in its entirety. She was inside the courthouse today. Now she's outside the courthouse for us. And give us some of the color of what we saw inside.
Nora, it's great to join you. It was such a unique experience in there because the courtroom was filled with all of the familiar faces of the court reporters, of the sketch artists, but Trump and his attorney, Todd Blanche, were presented on a screen to us. One of his attorneys, Emil Bovee, was in the courtroom, but this was an allowance that they made for Donald Trump, also to lessen the burden of the sentencing on him. It played a role in the Supreme Court, even allowing this to move forward. It was also remarkable to hear Trump speak on his own behalf, but in such a different way than you would normally hear a defendant speak at his own criminal trial. Usually that's to express remorse, to try to explain their actions. Trump sat there and really just defended himself, continued to proclaim his innocence and the injustice of this trial.
Katrina Kaufman, thank you. And Robert Costa, this is still a truly unprecedented, historic making movement because the president-elect is going to be inaugurated just 10 days from now. And even though it was virtual, he was in a courtroom today.
So while this procedure today can seem like a bit of a whimper, not a bang, legally speaking, historically, it is so notable. Just think, Nora, months ago, I was speaking with you. I was at the courtroom when former President Trump was sentenced in New York in late May. He was at his political bottom. He looked like he was not going to win the presidency. People inside the Republican Party said, we now have a convict who's going to be our nominee at the convention. It looked bleaker than ever for Trump. Now here we are in January 2025. Scott has done such great work on the January 6th investigations at the federal level. That has fallen away for the most part, not moving forward with prosecution. Same when it comes to classified records. And Trump, instead of losing the election in the wake of a conviction, is now the president-elect of the United States, has declared he has a mandate and has Republican majorities on Capitol Hill. Such a turnaround in American history in less than a year.
But Scott, this is not the end of the president's legal troubles or reporting or reports coming out about his legal troubles, right?
By the end of the day today, we could get the final report of what Special Counsel Jack Smith found in his investigation of efforts to overturn the 2020 elections. An appeals court in Atlanta could free up the Attorney General to release that today. Many people have been interested in reading what Jack Smith found, perhaps more than what he put in his charging documents. And Nora, one footnote. The defense attorney for Donald Trump today in that virtual hearing was Todd Blanche. That is going to be Donald Trump's nominee to be the #2 official at the Justice Department beginning this year.
And that is a very crucial post at the Attorney General's office and in the Justice Department. Thank you, Robert Costa, Scott McFarland, also to Caroline Polisi and Katrina Kaufman. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news, and then tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Nora O'Donnell.